Welcome to the Cambridge Financial Podcast with Bert Salazar, CEO at Cambridge Financial Partners, LLC. This podcast is all about tax-preferred retirement planning, economics, financial risk management, and achieving a risk-free and successful financial life. Now, your host, Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar.
Hey, good day, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. This is episode 110th of Your Tax-Free Retirement Life. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. Again, we've done 110 episodes, and I give you all a tremendous amount of credit for being there with me since day one and listening to this episode, and not only that, listening to this podcast. As you know, this podcast is about managing finances, retirement distribution planning, tax planning, and all the things that are going to make a big difference in your lives, not only now, but also when you reach retirement age. The title for this podcast today is, you're either good at making money or you're good at making excuses. And believe me, after, spending 30 years in the financial services industry doing retirement distribution planning and also tax planning, I have heard all the excuses that you can imagine in the world. So, again, what I'd like to do with you today is I want to share some ideas and I want to share some thoughts that are going to help you, hopefully, to start thinking outside of the box and for you to start looking at your finances, as I always say, through a telescope as opposed to a microscope. Now, making money in the United States is fairly easy. Some people, can do it a lot easier than others, but at the end of the day, making money is fairly easy. And you can do so, and you can save for retirement fairly easy as well. You can make contributions to your retirement accounts, and it doesn't matter whether it's an IRA or 401k or 403b, a SEP, if you're a self-employed individual. Some accounts allow you to contribute more than others, so obviously depending on your goals and objectives and your financial resources, and you'll get to pick the account that you feel may be most suitable for you. It's also very easy to maximize corporate matches to qualified plans. So if you work for an employer that makes a match on your qualified plans, that's easy to do. You should always make contributions, up to the match on your qualified plan so you can get 100% of that match so that money can start working on your behalf as soon as possible. One of the things that I always talk about is that you should be contributing 15 to 20% of your pre-tax income to your retirement accounts or to your savings accounts or to your investment accounts. I think the challenge for most Americans is many of them do not contribute to those levels, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next segment. Now, many of you should be investing in real estate, and I know that most of you don't, but I like real estate from a cash flow standpoint, and also a lot of the deductions, exemptions, and credits that you can attach to it that makes your financial life prior to retirement and after retirement a lot easier for you. It's also a good idea to be able to live within your financial means. Now, I have met clients that are very frugal. I have met clients that, spend a lot of money. Most of the clients that I meet for the first time have been spending a lot more money than they really needed to from a business perspective. And then you should always keep debt to a minimum. And there's a difference between good debt and bad debt. Now, you may say, well, Bert, debt is debt and all debt is bad. Yeah, I would agree with you up to a certain point there. But for instance, if you have a mortgage on your personal home, that's considered good debt. Why? Because you're accruing, you're building equity in that home. By the same token, you can get a deduction on the interest that you're paying, so you're able to have the IRS become a partner with you in that debt. By giving you certain tax breaks on an annual basis, and that should be a good debt. If you get into debt, let's say, because you just bought a piece of real estate property that is going to be an income-producing property or starts out as an income-producing property almost immediately, then I would argue that's also a good debt. Now, bad debt is credit card debt. So if you get into a debt where you're paying anywhere between 18 and 24% interest on an annual basis, and you cannot deduct, once again, you cannot deduct the interest that you're paying on that debt, then that would be bad debt. On top of that, obviously, it would take a lot of money to service that debt and to liquidate that debt because the interest is astronomically high, and therefore it is almost an impossibility for most Americans to be able to pay down those debts, over the years. So if making money is easy, why is it that keeping the money is so hard? Well, the challenge is that in order for you to be able to keep your money, you have to start making decisions that many of you have never thought through in the past. Most important, you have to make a paradigm shift in the way you think, because you're going from accumulation to distribution. And what I see happening to Americans, for at least most Americans that I deal with, is that they take the same mathematical formulas that they used during the accumulation stages of their lives. They take those same formulas to the distribution stages, and they don't realize that when it comes to distribution, the rules of engagement totally change. Because you do go from accumulation to distribution, and distribution is all about cash flow. And if it is guaranteed cash flow, even better. And if it is tax-free guaranteed cash flow, that would be best. The challenge is that, many of you are still carrying along those considerations that you made prior to retirement. What are some of the things that I see and why money is so hard to keep in retirement is that, most Americans do not save enough money for retirement. They're not saving that traditional 15 to 20% since they started working. Now, they may save 15% once they're maybe 5 to 10 years away from retirement, but statistically speaking, prior to that, they're barely saving anywhere between 1 and 5%. There was a period in early 2000 where the savings rate for Americans in the U.S. was a negative number. Now, most Americans do not invest in income-producing assets, whether they happen to be income-producing stocks or, in this case, I like the idea of income-producing real estate. And the reason for that is fear. The reason for that is that we're being bombarded by all of these mutual fund companies and retirement companies and institutional investors that are always telling us to invest in the mutual fund of the week or the stock of the month or whatever that may be, that we don't pay attention to getting out of our own ways and try to get into the real estate business. Now, it's important if you're going to get into real estate that you learn about real estate. Perhaps that you get a real estate license, because if you become an active real estate investor, then you can participate in some really, really interesting deductions, exemptions, and credits that you would not otherwise have, even if you invest in real estate. So once again, most Americans do not invest in income-producing assets. The other issue with that is that, cash flow should not start when you retire. So what happens is you start putting money away into your 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, SEPs, or whatever that may be, TSPs, if you work for the federal government, and you do that because you're hoping, and although hope is not a financial strategy, that you're going to put enough money that money is going to grow on a tax-deferred basis, that you're hoping to get a high rate of return on those investments, and then you're hoping that by the time you get to retirement, you're going to have sufficient income there whereby you're going to be able to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Now, the challenge with that is there's no cash flow. There's no cash flow being permeated on your retirement assets. So you're actually working for your money instead of allowing your money also to work for you. So even if you buy a piece of real estate property, let's say you're 40 years of age and you plan to retire at 65. In a traditional retirement account, then obviously you can put all that money away for 25 years, and then when you get to age 65, you're hoping to start enjoying those benefits. But what would happen if you would have invested in real estate when you were at the age of 40? And let's say that you started to generate cash flow right away. And I don't care, as long as it is a positive cash flow. I don't care if it's $100 a month. That's $1,200 a year. On top of that, you have the appreciation of the property. On top of that, you have all of the deductions, exemptions, and credits that are suitable for real estate investors. What happens if you go from $100 to $500 to $1,000 a month of net positive cash flow? Now, using the time value of money, factor that in on a monthly basis times 25 years times a given rate of return. How much money would you had the ability to enjoy during those 25 years prior to retirement, and then where would you be at the point in time that you retire on those assets? I have a client of mine that did this I think he did it for about 20 years, where he purchased one duplex in South Florida every year, and he did it last time. He moved out of state, and his brother-in-law became his financial advisor maybe 5 years ago. So last time I did with him, he had bought a duplex in South Florida every single year for 15 years, and a lot of those duplexes were already paid for, and they were just generating guaranteed income. So you have one piece of property with two apartments. So that's a duplex in South Florida. And he was doing extremely well. And I'm sure he's still doing very well. He's probably buying additional properties. And then I think there were a couple of years when the real estate market, like in 2008, went down, he had enough credit and enough cash flow that he doubled down on the duplexes. 1 year, I think he bought three of them. And then on another year, I think it was in 2009, he bought two of them. So between 2008 and 2009, he bought 5 duplexes, and he bought them at a discount. So, what if you would do that? And again, I have no idea where you're at in your retirement spectrum. You may be either at retirement or close to retirement, or if you're, 5 to 10 years of retiring, start thinking about diversifying in real estate investments where you can start using that cash flow immediately, and you don't have to deal with the 59.5 rule or the 70.5 rule or any of those rules that pretty much prevent you from generating cash flow prior to retirement, and also income prior to retirement. Now, Warren Buffett said this a few years ago, and I thought it was very interesting because it makes a lot of sense. He said that if you're not making money while you sleep, then you'll have to work until you die. Let me repeat that again. If you're not making money while you sleep, then you'll have to work until you die. Now, Warren Buffett is a prime example of somebody that makes a lot of money while he sleeps, because he buys into great companies that pay dividends and capital gains. So, all he has to do is wake up on the green side of the grass every day, and he's got cash flow coming in, millions and millions of dollars of cash flow coming into his household, and I'm not even factoring in his companies every single month. Now, I do and provide financial and retirement strategies to public employees. I do have a lot of them that are clients of mine. Most of them are public safety, so primarily law enforcement, police and fire. And they all have a guaranteed pension, and many of them have Social Security benefits. Yet, most of them cannot live on their pension and Social Security benefits by themselves. And the reason for that is that they went out too far. They got into too much debt. They don't know how to manage assets. They're not willing to make the hard decisions at the right time and for the right reasons. But if you live on a pension and Social Security, that should be enough to maintain your standard of living in the United States. Now, one of the things that I always caution clients that are anywhere between 1 and 5 years away from retirement is to keep an eye out for the retirement kill zone. And for me, the retirement kill zone are the 5 years preceding your retirement date and the first 5 years post-retirement. So that 10-year window of the 5 years before you retire and then the first 5 years after you retire are going to be very, very critical for you and your family. Because if you make a financial mistake along those lines, then your retirement life is going to totally change. And if you make a financial mistake, because obviously everyone makes mistakes, then what are you willing to do in order to repair those mistakes? Are you willing to take and make hard decisions that otherwise you would have never made, but you're doing so because at the end of the day you need to maintain your retirement lifestyle for the rest of your life? So keeping an eye on the retirement kill zone is very, very critical from a business and financial point of view. Now, that brings me to another point, which is just as critical as keeping an eye on the retirement kill zone. And that point is you have to be able to adapt, adjust, and improvise your retirement goals and objectives. That's something that I learned in the Marine Corps many years ago, that we always needed to reassess and we needed to adapt, adjust, and improvise all the decision making that we were going through at the point in time that we were in a firefight, or if we were going through a training exercise and all of a sudden something else happened along those lines and we needed to reassess the position that we had taken before. So once again, if you make a mistake during your retirement kill zone, then you need to be able to improvise your retirement goals and objectives. You need to change them. You need to reassess. And therefore, guaranteed paychecks and life insurance are cornerstones of a successful retirement. And I get sick of talking about this, and interestingly enough, my more successful clients, they all have guaranteed paychecks through guaranteed annuity programs, and they also owned a tremendous amount of life insurance that not only do they use as a supplemental retirement plan and as a long-term care benefit provider, but they also use it as asset protection. And when you truly understand the value of a guaranteed paycheck through annuities and creating an annuity portfolio that is going to be able to do different things for you at different times and for different reasons, and you also understand the value of life insurance and retirement, then obviously your financial life is going to be at a much, much better place than you would otherwise. And for those of you that understand, there's no need to explain. For those of you that don't, no explanation will be enough for you. And that's why I always say that many times you need to be able to get out of your own way, because otherwise you're not going to make it financially through the 30 years of retirement planning that you must do in order to offset the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years of your retirement life. So we've talked a little bit about making money is easy. We've also discussed a little bit about, keeping the money is hard and the mistakes that I see often. And then, last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about excuses, because the title for this podcast is that you're either good at making money or you're good at making excuses. And, excuses are just like, fill in the blank. You know exactly what comes after that. Because I hear it from existing clients and from new clients often. And this is what I hear: well, Bert, it's impossible for me to downsize. No, it's not. Maybe impossible in your mind, but it's not impossible from a physical standpoint and a financial standpoint. I also hear, Bert, I can't reduce my standard of living. Yes, you can. You can reduce your standard of living in many different ways, and that would mean that, you're not going to be starving to death, but you're going to be taking a look at your cash flow and your income and your expenses and your your income statements if you own a business, or your balance sheets if you own a business, and you have the ability to make certain cuts that are going to make your life a lot better for you and for many years to come. I also hear, Bert, I don't want to work for the rest of my life, but I'm not willing to sacrifice. Well, like Warren Buffett said, if you're not making money while you sleep, then you'll have to work until you die. And I'll tell you this, I'm 63 years of age. I'm in good shape. I work out all the time, so does my wife. I have no intentions of retiring. I'm going to continue. Now, I own 2 businesses, but I will continue to retire. Now, I may get to a point, like I am now. I work 3 days a week, and then obviously I have a long weekend every single week, and that's a good thing. But I don't want to get to the point where Saturday night is every single day, because I need to stay active. Obviously I just finished writing my first book, so I'm always keeping myself occupied, and so should you. You should work for as long as you possibly can, because working is happiness. Now, you don't have to work full-time. You can work part-time. You can start a business that you've been thinking about doing for many, many years, but because of the fact that you were working full-time, you didn't have the ability to do so, so now is the time. But you have to stay active. I also hear, Bert, I'm not willing to walk away from the definition of insanity. And the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result. And obviously there's nothing I can do for you, because at the end of the day, I can help everyone, but I can't save everyone. And some of you are just not salvageable. Some of you have the definition of insanity so ingrained in your DNA that, even when someone is showing you the door, you want to go through the wall. And, those types of people I don't want to deal with, because I would waste a tremendous amount of time and accomplish nothing. I only want to work with people that are coachable and that are willing to make paradigm shifts in their lives, once they realize that a new way of looking at their financial necessities is more apropos than doing it any other way. I also hear people saying to me, Bert, I'm not willing to move. I don't want to move out of my city. I don't want to move out of my state. I don't want to move out of the U.S. to live anywhere else. I think I've said this a few times on previous podcasts, but I have a number of clients that are now residing in Spain. Spain is one of the best countries in the world, at least in Europe, for you to live in. The standard of living is very low. The quality of life is very, very good. Now everybody's going through the COVID-19 issue in Spain that has gotten hit very hard. But that will also pass in the very near future. But I have a number of clients that live all throughout Spain, and they love it there because their dollar goes a long way. They're able to live very comfortably. They're able to enjoy life. They get to travel all throughout Europe. I have clients of mine. I have one a couple of weeks ago that just sent me an email that he was in Florence and he was about to go to Positano, and he lives in Sevilla, Spain, in Seville, Spain, and he's always traveling. He's traveling 3-4 months out of the year, and he's got plenty of money to be able to do that with, because he's got Social Security benefits. He's got a little bit of business. He's still active in his business. He sold a plumbing company that he owned a few years ago, but didn't make as much money as he thought he would. So he figured that staying in the U.S. was going to curtail his retirement lifestyle, so he decided to move abroad. Now, how many of you are willing to do that? Obviously, if you're used to living in one place for many, many years, it's hard to walk away. But sometimes a new beginning is something good for most of us, and obviously most Americans and most of you that are listening to my podcast. Now, some of the questions that I asked, and I did a webinar this past week on 8 critical questions that are so important when it comes to retirement that you need to answer. But on another note, let me pose a couple of questions to all of you. And one is, what specific plans have you made to triple your income in retirement? Because you're going to have to. Because you're going to have to plan for 30 years in retirement. And by the way, all the money, a lot of the money that you're going to be spending in retirement, you haven't earned yet. So that means that those assets that you have set aside for retirement have to be able to earn sufficient income so you can get to the promised land and be able to reach your mortality and pass on, without running out of money before you run out of life. Now, how do you fix that? Well, you have to create guaranteed cash flow. And if you don't have guaranteed cash flow, then the probabilities, unless you happen to be a millionaire or a multimillionaire, the probabilities that you're going to run out of money before you run out of life are going to be extremely, extremely high. Another question is, what would happen to your financial situation if the stock market dropped 45%, as it did in 2003 and 2008? Now, we're going through one right now with the COVID-19 bear market, as I call it. We have no idea how this is going to end up. How long is it going to take for the economy to get going again? I am not as optimistic as some of the people in our government are. So, I think there are going to be a lot of challenges for our economic environment, at least for the next 18 to 24 months. So my question to you, if you're going to be in retirement, how many bear markets can you go through? By the way, bear markets, except for the longest bull market that we just went through, which lasted anywhere between 11 and 12 years, but normally bear markets happen every 5 years. So if you're planning for a 30-year retirement, are you willing to go through 6 bear markets? How about 5? How about 4? How about 3? How about 2? How about 1? How many bear markets do you think you can financially afford to go through in retirement? I would argue none. And the only way to avoid a bear market is to have your assets protected from stock market volatility. Another question that I would ask you is, what have you done as a family to protect your assets and to protect yourself from dealing with the rising cost of healthcare and Alzheimer's in retirement? The longer you live in retirement, the longer the susceptibility, to have medical issues and concerns that are going to increase the cost of maintaining your standard of living, because now you got to pay for that. What if you have Parkinson's? What if you have dementia? There are different orders of dementia that people go through as they get older. What if you have to live with Alzheimer's? Who's going to provide the care? How much is that care going to cost? By the way, the average cost of long-term care is actually increasing at almost three times, the rate of inflation in the United States. How are you going to cope with that? Do you have enough assets set aside for you to be able to cope with that? Are your assets guaranteed? Are your assets tax-free so you can maximize that income? Because the higher the tax rates, the less income you're going to have in retirement. And we all know what's going to happen to taxes in the very near future. Also, what is the impact of your provisional income calculations on your overall retirement income? If you have to pay taxes on your Social Security benefits, ladies and gentlemen, then you're more than likely going to run out of money before you run out of life, 5 to 8 years sooner than expected. And the reason for that is when you have to pay taxes on your Social Security benefits, especially at the worst case scenario, which would mean that 85% of your Social Security benefits would be taxed, then that means you have to dip even more into your retirement accounts in order to generate sufficient income to offset that taxation hole that you created for yourself inside of your Social Security benefit. And those are provisional income calculations that most of the financial advisors that each and every one of you deal with on a daily basis are not able to answer because they don't even know what a provisional income calculation is. So, those are things that you need to pay attention to. And then last but not least, what have you done to create a tax-free retirement life? I would argue for most of you, very little. Maybe you just started putting a little bit of money away in your Roth 401k and your Roth IRA, but that's about it. There are so many other things that you can do to create a tax-free retirement life, because at the end of the day, retirement is about accomplishing 4 things. Number 1, to be able to accomplish guaranteed cash flow. Number 2, be able to generate guaranteed tax-free cash flow. Number 3 is to be able to be as healthy as you possibly can and staying in good shape and being very active during your retirement life. And number 4 is to be able to manage the risk of the fatal 4 as part of your retirement plan. The risk of dying too soon, living too long, living with a disability, and living with eroding factors like taxes, inflation, stock market volatility, interest rate volatility, propensity to consume, lawsuits, etc. So I hope that I've been able to give you a pretty good podcast today. Always remember, if you need to get a hold of me, you can pick up the phone and call me at area code 786-766-1042. You can also send me an email at Bert, B-E-R-T, at bertsalazar.com. And always remember that my goal for each and every one of you and your families is to kind of help you all change the way that you see things. Because when you change the way that you see things, the things that you see change. So once again, thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time today, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye, and have a great day.